So in this video, Gen Z has become unemployable. We're going to react to this video. And honestly, people, I've not watched it as always. I like to see it with the people. But this should be an interesting watch. Let's see what's going on.
According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, new Gen Z workers make up the highest share of the unemployed in nearly 40 years, with only 30% of recent graduates securing full-time jobs in their field of study. Yet despite 98% of HR leaders claiming they struggle to find talent, 89% refuse to hire Gen Z, raising the question, why is the most educated generation in history becoming ghosted by minimum wage jobs?
Wow. Already I can give a pretty quick answer to that. One, because we know that we're not going to just work for nothing and be slaved around, and we actually have ambitions that we actually want to succeed. They don't like the fact that we don't make the job our whole personality, our whole life. I see a lot of the older generation, they will start work at 9 a.m. They're supposed to finish at 5 p.m, but they're still at work at 9 p.m. Now, Gen Z, we ain't doing that, man.
While you'd think that with each modern generation facing a worse job market than their parents, with nearly half of the entire workforce unable to afford even a minimal quality of life, that as Gen Z voices their frustrations over facing the worst entry-level job market in nearly 4 decades, the worst layoffs since the Great Recession, the second straight year of historic job revisions, the majority of H-1B approvals actually going to entry-level positions, only to then be told the job market has never been stronger, that all of this decay would finally be enough to force a nation to confront a system that has failed generation after generation. But instead,
and he's talking about the US, but the same thing is happening in the UK. Like they like to pretend as though the job market has never been better. But what I can say is, I feel as though nowadays everyone has a degree, whereas I think before it was very like far and few between who actually has a degree. Now it seems like everyone actually has a degree. So yeah, there's a lot more competition.
society refuses to evolve, dismissing it all as laziness and entitlement.
They don't want to work. They're spoiled brats. They've grown up in a world where it's everyone gets a trophy generation, and like the idea of showing up and going through traffic and being at the office at 8:45 and working till 6, they look at you like you got 10 heads to it. They think everything's on a silver platter. So it's very hard to motivate these people.
Yeah, funny how he says 6 p.m. when the contract would have definitely said 5 p.m. to finish.
They're really lazy, entitled losers.
So while Gen Z will apparently be forced to endure the same stereotypes as every previous generation, the reality is that this employment crisis largely stems from the complete gutting of entry-level jobs. Despite overwhelming evidence that AI is nowhere near fully automating the job market, with MIT finding that 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing, alongside the majority of AI layoffs now resulting in rehires, a survey of more than 600 recruiters worldwide, with over half coming from Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies, found that 1/3 of employers are nevertheless replacing entry-level jobs with AI. Even if those responses were simply an attempt to inflate investor confidence and boost stock prices, a separate Resume.org survey found that by 2027, 47% of employers expect to eliminate entry-level roles entirely, which means that whether AI actually works and unemployment skyrockets, or it completely backfires and results in a reduction in household wealth worse than 2008, the outcome remains the exact same as it always has. The burden falls on the generation entering the workforce.
And also, let's not forget as well that a lot of these companies, they like to, target countries like India, where they are allowed to pay them a lot less. Now, I don't remember the last time I called up a company to speak to the call center, and it was not an Indian on the other side of the line. Because they know that, they have to pay us the minimum wage. In their mind, they'd rather save half, if not more. I'm not too sure how much they get paid, but they'd rather save a substantial amount and just go hire an Indian. And as long as they have Wi-Fi, they're good to go. Quick training, and just like that.
To better understand the long-term repercussions eliminating entry-level jobs has on Gen Z and the future of the job market, I spoke with Brian Creeley, a corporate recruiter, hiring manager, HR professional for some of the world's largest companies, career coach, and creator of the YouTube channel, A Life After Layoff.
The funnel into an organization is really supposed to be You give people the baseline opportunities to not only just learn the technology and this like demonstrate those skills so that they can move into more advanced roles in an organization, but it's also to learn corporate culture. That base level is, you're supposed to be sitting in those meetings with the more senior people and taking notes and observing through osmosis. And if they're going to eliminate that entire thing, what is the leadership going to look like, the senior level positions in an organization in 5 years, in 10 years? At the same time, they're also eliminating the middle managers. So it's like you're being squished. And now you've got these senior level people. These executives are loving it because they get to, they get to make money rain, they get their bonuses and all of this stuff. But I don't know if they're actually thinking through the big picture of, you're eliminating the development of the youngest generations, and you're also eliminating the middle manager positions for these senior level people to move into. So now you're basically creating a single band of people who are stuck in a very narrow range of roles. That's not entry level, that's not leadership, it's in between. And then you've got this executive kind of like sitting up in an ivory tower making these decisions. So what's it going to look like in 10 years from now when there is that crunch and now all these senior executives are retiring?
And while the lack of investment and gutting of entry-level jobs existed long before the AI race, the unfortunate reality is Gen Z is also competing for these limited positions against older, more experienced, and overqualified workers being forced to accept entry-level pay. According to Stanford's Digital Economy Lab, employment among Gen Z workers aged 22 to 25 declined by 16% in the occupations most exposed to artificial intelligence, while older workers in those same occupations continued filling those roles instead. Today, 2/3 of all entry-level roles are filled by workers with over 7 years of work experience, while 61% of full-time entry-level positions require 3 to 5 years of experience. The Federal Reserve suggests this could be the result of decades of career and wage stagnation, as traditional routes for career advancement, such as job hopping, now provide little financial benefit, ultimately creating a compressed career ladder where 52% of graduates are underemployed within a year of graduation.
But you know what the thing is as well, like, a lot of us now have a mindset of, the idea of going to work for somebody else who literally just sees us as a number. They can like literally replace us at any minute. We can get made redundant any minute, and then we have to go fend for ourselves. It's not really as appealing as I assume the previous generation seen it as. And even so, now we just see it as, we're just going to work to try and help someone else achieve their dreams. What about our dreams? And even myself in my 20s, all I can say is I do wish that I spent more time focused on, creating something for myself, as opposed to, going out there and trying to help someone else achieve their dreams and me going to work for somebody else. Like, so obviously I'm not the only one who thinks that way. That generally is a typical theme amongst Gen Z at this current moment in time.
While a study by the Burning Glass Institute found that 73% will remain underemployed a decade later.
The candidate who's coming into that interview, who maybe had that capability, who has that competency, who has that potential, just doesn't have a resume to prove it, now has that stigma going against them of like, well, you're not hireable. You're not good. You're not going to be a good fit for us. Because I've heard those conversations. I've heard hiring managers making stories up about people based on what's on their resume or what they've achieved in the past. And they start creating these stories. Well, this guy's not hireable. This guy's not promotable. He didn't get promoted at his last job. If he was truly a high performer, why didn't this other company or these other two companies ever recognize their capability? And I would like look at them and say, like, how do you know what this person has or hasn't done or is capable of without even looking at them? Just you're telling a story. Maybe the whole story isn't on a piece of paper. Maybe the whole story isn't my bias toward what I think this candidate's career should have looked at like, because when I started my career, things looked a lot different.
And to prove just how deep the stigma actually is, LinkedIn's own algorithm has been shown to suppress profiles with employment gaps, while ATS services and job platforms suppress or automatically reject applicants working lower wage jobs such as grocery store clerks or restaurant servers because, in the eyes of many employers, they signal class, resulting in a labor market where Gen Z is fundamentally trapped in a cycle of low-paying jobs with little opportunity for advancement.
Like, does LinkedIn even have any real effect anymore? Like when I think about LinkedIn, does it really carry that same level of weight? Even, others like Indeed, are these really still sufficient in 2026? I'm not too sure.
Today, Gen Z accounts for 55% of all multiple job holders, the highest share of any generation in well over a decade, leaving 83% reporting burnout, while 61% have delayed or avoided preventative health screenings. And while I totally understand delaying medical care due to the concern of cost or time, take it from me, someone who was told by two separate doctors that spitting up blood was not an issue and almost died in his apartment due to actually having undiagnosed factor V, that your health is the most important thing in your life. Which is why I'm very grateful to be partnered with today's sponsor, ZocDoc. ZocDoc is need the ZocDoc app to search for ZocDoc for partnering with the channel. And unfortunately, just as millennials were told to simply learn to code, rather than having an honest conversation about collapsing entry-level jobs, crushing student loan debt, competition against older workers, rampant automation, and the rising cost of living, society's solution for Gen Z has simply become go into the trades. Despite having spent years covering the decline of vocational education and the stigma surrounding blue-collar work, I still believe the trades are an excellent career path for many people, but pretending that they can absorb an entire generation will only recreate the exact same bottlenecks that white-collar workers are already facing. A new Wallet Hub study, ranking the best and worst entry-level jobs in America, found that trade careers dominate the bottom of the list based on immediate opportunity, growth potential, and job hazards, while also ranking among the nation's least happy occupations. But more importantly, nearly every single one of my friends who are in the trades have recently been telling me that if they were to enter their trade today, without their years of experience, their industry connections, or overall reputation, they are convinced they would not be able to find a job because of increased competition and an overall economic downturn in their industry.
Even roles like, being an electrician, plumber, all of these type of roles, yeah, like they're not easy to get into anymore, man. I just feel as though we're going to go into a era where everything is, very hustle minded. Like, find a way. We're not gonna really be given opportunities in terms of, a 9 to 5 anymore. It's just going to be very hustle, 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 everyday hustle and bustle and find a way. I feel as though that's the era we're going into. Because there's only so much time that, a limited amount of jobs, and with so much people applying, there's only a certain amount of time left, man. This is why, especially like in America as well, you see a lot of people trying to become content creators as well. Um, because it's like everyone's starting to realize that, man, like things ain't easy out here right now, man.
So while Gen Z has effectively become the test dummies for AI in both classrooms and entry-level careers, only to be turned around and called lazy and entitled, despite working more jobs simultaneously than any previous generation, with society's only real solution becoming go into the trades, it is crucial that if we care at all about the future of our nation and the children who have no idea the economy they're about to inherit, we begin having honest conversations about how to actually course correct before another generation is forced to pay an even worse price.
Unfortunately, I know people are not going to want to hear this, but I think that this is going to be the new norm. Like, I don't think that we're going to return to a job market. Like, some people are like holding out, like, well, eventually things will improve. They may, because things break completely and you have to rebuild, but like, what's the pain involved in that? That's a much bigger, like, Great Depression level kind of event. I know some people will throw out like, well, we just need universal basic income. I have my own strong opinions about that. Um, there's not necessarily a clear end game that looks great. And like, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom about this. I do think that there's still, if you take faculty of your own career, you're really driving things. You treat it like you are the CEO of a business of one. You build multiple. People don't like to hear this, but you got to build multiple streams of income so that you're not beholden to any one single paycheck and single employer. That you're not knee-jerk reactioning. You actually build your career with an actual strategy. There is a process to do that. And so many people do not do that, mainly because they're never taught that in university or wherever. They kind of just it's like throwing the baby bird out of the nest and saying, figure it out yourself. And most people, not surprisingly, don't really do a good job of that. But I just don't see that this is a fixable problem without there being a wholesale change in how we approach, like, and I'm not just saying like we as the job seeker, I'm saying is like society looks at what role the human being plays in where we want this society to go in the future.
And so what I hope that we're beginning to recognize is that as a society, if we have any desire to have the future be just a little bit better than today, to have the future be just a little bit better than the past 4 decades, we have to stop putting these blanketed statements on every single massive systemic decay that has been causing issues for as long as we can remember. I just cannot understand for the life of me how every generation emerging into adulthood, at least every modern generation. No, really, I mean, I'll show you, there's a quote from Plato discussing older workers or older people saying that young people are lazy. But the unfortunate reality...
Wait, look at this. What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders. Like, no, the elders, generally speaking, disrespect the youngers because they feel as though they are on some, respect your elders. No, we respect those who respect us. Why is it because someone's older than you, you must just automatically give them a high level of respect and a high regard if they ain't showing you that same level of respect? It just seems very backwards to me. It just doesn't make sense at all.
Discussing older workers or older people saying that young people are lazy. But the unfortunate reality is that as a society, instead of these older workers or each generation during their period of time, instead of pointing up at the people that are actually undercutting their wages or making them work more hours for less pay, or reducing retirement benefits, reducing paid time off, aren't able to keep up with the cost of living, or reducing health insurance benefits, you name it. Instead of pointing at the people actually doing the issues, what better person to point your fingers at than the little guy that has no power to stand up for themselves? And the biggest thing that I really cannot understand is that when you hear a hiring manager or somebody, say they're traditionally in their 50s or so, the people that really have power to be making these decisions, the people on the news, pumping out these headlines, when they say the young generation is lazy and entitled, the likelihood of that 55-year-old individual saying that, having a kid that is graduating from college or already has, is unbelievably high. So are you saying the reality is that every Gen Z is lazy except for your kid? Are you saying that you had absolutely no responsibility in helping parent the future generation? How do you point at young kids and say, yeah, they're addicted to social media or to their phone? Who handed them their phone? Older adults, do we have no responsibility for the country and the reality that we're a part of?
True.
You're telling me that every single systemic decay falls on the little guy. Or falls on all these other things, right? Like a massive narrative is that the entire job market is collapsing because of minimum wage. Right?
And a lot of the times, the older generation gave the child the phone because they just didn't want to deal with the child. So that they just shoved the phone in their hands, the tablet in their hands, as a way where, they're spending time with them. When really, you're not spending time with the child. You're just giving them a tool, an electronic, just so they can leave you alone.
Like, that is a real argument. I get that on every single one of my videos. So it's blanketed statement after blanketed statement after blanketed statement, and we fail to recognize that we are all experiencing the exact same thing. The thing that makes me the most sad out of all of this is that, Gen Z, as a generation, we have the opportunity to genuinely make a difference because we recognize the issue. We are at the age to where we are being vocal about it. It's kind of bad enough that we have to address it. And so what we have to do is we have to not only pay the burden of previous decades of economic mismanagement, but we also have to start envisioning the future. But the unfortunate reality is that as a generation, predominantly, again, not every single person, but predominantly, we've lost hope. We've already given up. There's a reason why Gen Z is called the nihilistic generation. And so if you have already given up and you have no hope, then we're grouped right in with every other generation. And the very frustrating thing from myself, because again, I'm going to address the systemic issues. I am then going to come on and I'm going to do something like this at the tail end of the video because I want to give you in-person, one-on-one kind of, why does this matter? And then at the end of the video, I address, hey, these are things that we can do. Now, I can't and not necessarily address, hey, here's how you face decades of economic, uh, destruction of entry level jobs. There isn't just a solution I can give you for that. And I hope that you kind of recognize that there are individual things that you could do to help better your opportunities of getting a job. Like Brian with a Life After Layoff has plenty of those things on his channel. But what I do here is I just try to talk about the systemic issue. And to be able to fix a systemic issue, because we're not the ones writing the policy and we're not the ones making the corporate decisions, is we have to change our attitude and our desire to make things better. We are the ones that have each other's hands around each other's throats. We're the ones not making decisions in our own lives. And so what I do is I say, hey, these are ways that you can do agency, and here's why you should have hope, and do this or do this. Try to look at this through your personal life. When was the last time you talked to your neighbor? When was the last time you had these conversations? And so then I offer things of, hey, make sure that you go out and vote. One of the reasons that this happened was because there was no Gen Z turnout. And then what comments do I receive? There's no point in voting. Voting doesn't do anything, so why would I waste my time? And so then I go into my friends, right? Because you would say, well, go touch grass. So I go talk to my friends. Not a single one of them will vote either. Okay, so voting isn't an option. So then I do something like, hey, here's a petition that we're trying to work on. This is what we're trying to do and raise awareness. And then what comments do I receive? The petition isn't going to do anything. Everything sucks. There's no hope. Why would I even waste my time? Okay, so now I go to my friends and I start talking about this, and they say nothing's going to change. Okay, so we're not going to vote and we're not going to do petitions. So then I do this, I help promote this thing to raise awareness for the pursuits of raising awareness for humanity versus AI, that we need to prioritize humanity over all of these other things. And we have to get our policymakers to actually start regulating these things and work on the different aspects of what it is that's going on. What do I receive? It's never going to do anything. Why would I even bother? Our policymakers don't do anything. It's just greed. It's just corruption. They don't care about us. All right. I go to my friends. Hey, what do you think that's going on? I get nothing. Okay. So I continuously go around and I try to talk to people in real life. There's nothing. But what it is that we do talk about is we talk about the basketball game. We talk about soccer. We talk about the celebrity, the next movie, right? We talk about all of these things, but everything actually impacting our lives, we refuse to have conversations about. And so now I'm in this position to where I'm thinking, okay, so we're not going to vote. We're not going to do petitions.
But be like, voting. Do we actually really think voting really makes a significant difference? Because honestly, if voting really made a difference, yeah, and we're complaining about how society is today, if voting made a difference, society would be getting better. Like the politicians, the government will be doing what they can to make the countries better, make the peoples better, opportunities better. But if things are getting worse, then what is voting really actually doing, man? I don't really think voting doing anything, man. In fact, I'll go one further. I don't even think voting really makes a difference with who goes in office. I think everything is planned, everything is scripted. I don't think it really. I just feel like it's just all an illusion to make us feel as though we have a say when we don't have a say with anything, though.
We're not going to do, any sort of movement or to get our representatives interacting. I talk about, hey, let's do these boycotts. Nope, we're not going to do that either because, that's not going to work. Okay. I talk about, hey, maybe we need to start talking about creating a better form of unions. Oh, unions are just bad. It's never going to work. So I'm at this point where every single time I produce or I try to mention something and I try to talk about agency within your own life and all of these different things, all I'm now getting is an overwhelming tsunami of why it's not going to work. The unfortunate reality is that if you have a little brother or little sister or a little son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter, that in a decade and 15 years from now, we are going to hear the exact same thing from them, that there's no entry-level jobs. And they're going to look at us and they're going to say that we had it so easy. They're going to be upset that we didn't do more for them. And it's a travesty. That is going to be such a sad reality.
Yeah. That is actually what they're going to say, to be fair. They're going to say that we didn't do much for them. We had it easy, when I think we as a generation, Gen Z, we've had it the hardest, man. I mean, lockdown definitely stunted a lot of our growth. And then, you know, to get back into the societal norms, it definitely impacted us significantly. So I would actually say we've had it the hardest, man, out of every single generation. And the older generation, it's not even as though they even pass down any knowledge to us and, you know, teach us anything, or, you know, put us in any game. Like, they don't do anything, bro. We literally out here fending for ourselves, trying to understand life, understand ourselves at the same time, with no real infrastructure or structure from anyone, to be honest. But yeah, people, let me know what you guys think about this. I think, um, you know, a lot of what he's saying is true, but you know, the voting and all of these things and the unions and all of these things aren't gonna make a difference, man. The system has it their way. The system has their plans, and their plans are to make us suffer, man. You know, and then they're gonna implement whatever they want to implement, and you know, we will own nothing and just be happy, essentially. But yeah, people, let me know what you guys think about this. As usual, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm out.